It is my great honor and pleasure to be here with you today. This is a conversation that we are all in. This is such a vibrant and vigorous conversation happening across so many different stakeholders and industries and disciplines and geographies. And I'm delighted to be here to engage in this conversation about smart cities. And from my perspective, I'm most excited to be here to talk about cities. And I'll talk more about that in a second. I would like to, first of all, welcome you into a PowerPoint-free presentation. And what I'm going to do is try to offer a few reflections to get us to the to the discussion, which I'm sure is going to be excellent and compelling. A little bit about myself, just a few little disclosures here. I'm a scholar practitioner, so I have a background in practice, and I'm currently housed in the academy at Georgetown. I'm a decided localist, so I'm very interested in place and individual communities within cities. I have a body of work over the course of my career that has really focused on the nexus between communities and natural systems. And for those of you that are local residents, I spent 8 years working on the original infrastructure system of our city here, which is our rivers. And I worked on repositioning and thinking about the role of a highly contaminated river in the future as a resource for thinking about the future of the city, and that's the Anacostia River. And I spent a significant amount of time at a private think tank, the Urban Land Institute, thinking about the significance of climate change to cities and to the real estate industry in particular. More recently, I've spent more time thinking about how knowledge management happens for individual communities within cities, and how the discipline of cities can be organized. And I was co-curator of knowledge management for the World Economic Forum, their urbanization initiative, and have spent a very significant amount of time working with the commercial real estate industry on how to think about the commercial real estate business in the context of a very rapidly changing urban context and very rapidly changing policy context. I'm here today and want to just extend my congratulations to both Sam and to Hannah, and I'm here representing Georgetown. I oversee the professional program in urban planning, and I'm the faculty director working with the President's Office at Georgetown University in creating what we think of as a radically interdisciplinary research network that we're calling the Georgetown Global Cities Initiative. There's a website you can go visit to learn more about that. To really think about how the many factors, many dynamic factors that characterize our society are changing cities and local communities. So what I'd like to do is start off with a very general question, and that is, when we say the word or the term smart cities, are we really talking about an end, or are we talking about a means? And I'd like to, I think Steve's presentation was so great, because we can indeed think about the city today in terms of what we might think of as an emerging discipline of urban science, of really observing the city. But I think Steve will agree with me, that is not necessarily new. The process and the methodologies that we're employing to do that are certainly new, but the practice is certainly not. I was struck by some of your slides because they remind me of some of the diagrams that Holly White made through personal observation of the streets of New York City and the public spaces of New York City in the 1960s and 1970s. And for the students of cities out there, we need only to go back to the original text, the oldest text that we have on cities, Vitruvius's 10 Books on Architecture, to immediately observe that the issue of scientific inquiry in cities was front and center in establishing knowledge to plan and design the future of communities. A major issue that we've already heard about this morning, but I would like to raise and elevate even further, is a very important and increasingly sophisticated focus on systems in cities. Of course, we've always had infrastructure systems, but the application of systems thinking and systems theory to cities is certainly being radically elevated. But what I would like to underscore is that when we think of cities and we think of communities, cities and communities really are very, very radical integrators of different systems. And so we do, of course, need to start thinking more critically about systems of systems. And there has been a lot of great work on this, especially recently in the conversation on risk management and resilience within cities. But I would like to encourage all of us engaged in this dialogue to think of systems and also in a value creation perspective and paradigm. And so I want to just make a few comments about the relationship of risk and value. Generally, we've seen that cities are very accustomed to living with very high levels of risk. And we can think of for me, the kind of poster child of this is always the city of Naples that has decided to locate itself at the base of a volcano. I mean, I think that's a very graphic illustration of that, and we have to understand that often the drivers of change are not risk, but really new value creation frameworks. And we can understand the entire processes of urbanization as a process of consumers and users and residents of people being driven by new value propositions, and whether in a formal economic sense or in an informal economic sense, we see, and I think we have to see people at the center of this conversation and not as an afterthought. And again, we see people literally voting with their feet and driving this incredible and unprecedented rate of urbanization in so many markets around the world. The issues of value and risk, of course, lead to very important critical conversations that we're involved with related to sustainability, but then also very quickly finance. And as we've already heard this morning, very, very interesting dilemmas with respect to cross-sector partnerships and how projects, how initiatives, how systems are financed. So with that, I want to just draw on a publication that I authored a few years ago to just frame this set of themes that I believe are essential to thinking about smart cities. And this is a book I wrote called The City in 2050, together with Maureen McAvey. And I want to echo some of earlier comments and points this morning that as cities are under tremendous pressure from a series of drivers, whether they be growing populations, migration patterns, both domestic and international, or shifting demographics of aging societies, and incredible economic and environmental pressures to figure out how to sustain themselves through energy systems and water systems. And as I think we all know, this is sometimes an issue of efficiency and efficiency of systems, but in many cases it is really a set of dynamics that require the invention of entirely new systems. And so whether that's water availability, the challenges of managing pollution runoff within metropolitan cities, these are major challenges for which we don't have adequate existing systems. The broader issues of how we support the infrastructure of our cities and importantly maintain them is something that we as in urban governance and as broader even domestic frameworks are still working on. And whether that's learning how to manage the deferred maintenance of our infrastructure. Most notably, we still, from time to time, have bridges falling down in our cities. We have infrastructure patterns that, for economic reasons, cannot be sustained by local forms of governance, municipalities and counties. And as we've already heard this morning, we are creating some infrastructure networks that raise very, very serious questions around risk and the impacts of their interruption. And I'd like to end this kind of portion on drivers and pressures on cities with just a note on the capital markets themselves and the economic context that cities find themselves in. Whether that's a incredible concentration of capital in key cities globally, or whether it's the concentration of capital within neighborhoods, within cities. We have very uneven patterns of wealth within cities. And at the same time, we're finding that the competition for capital has, of course, been globalized. And just as a quick aside, many, I would argue, of the smart cities initiatives that we see globally are really part and parcel of a global economic development strategy that individual cities have formulated. And then finally, and I do think this is extremely important in the context of smart city systems, the manner in which we assess and value risk associated with those systems is certainly imperfect. And if you think of the incredible, quick, and rapid pace of disruption that's occurring in the marketplace, often driven by consumers themselves, it is just astounding. And I think just the easy illustration of that, and I'll just take the example from our own city here in Washington. If you look at the disruption in the transportation sector itself, with ride-sharing services being introduced in only in a period of time measured by months and not years, it is incredible to think about how we might both adopt additional new systems, or and this I do think is a very interesting question of how consumers might choose to abandon systems. So with that as a background, I'd like to just introduce a couple of themes to help us organize the conversation. The first is, and these are kind of mega themes, if you will, we have a long tradition of thinking about cities as independent of the natural systems around them. And we've made a lot of progress there, I think, to really understand that cities are a part of the ecological systems that they are within. We have this great term of ecosystem services, and increasingly we are not only learning about what they are, but actually incorporating them into the value structures that we're creating. As I said before, whether it's water or electricity or the underlying utilities that allow a city and a community to function have in the past often not been incorporated into city planning strategies. They've really been thought of as constantly available resources. And as I mentioned before, the thinking around how energy or water is supplied has now been combined with an incredibly important and very interesting conversation about how energy and water is used. And so the integration of both supply and demand management and the economics of both supply and demand management are now incorporated into how we think about the creation and maintenance of those systems. That's really very new. Needless to say, and we've already heard, we are awash in data. We have more data than we've ever had before, and we reasonably can expect to have much more data than we have today in even the near future. And just the single change in cities of the adoption and incorporation of 5G technologies is really going to dramatically increase that. What that data allows us to do, which we haven't done a lot of in the past, is to actually model the systems. And so there's a tradition of doing that in the civil engineering world, certainly, and transportation. But modeling complex systems within cities is an opportunity that we have now that we generally haven't had before. And again, as we've already heard this morning, in a very interesting set of examples, the opportunity to geolocate data is something that, of course, we've done in the past with our imperfect tools, but the amount of precision that we have at hand today is really very radical. one of the challenging issues, I believe, that we have with data and data management is a challenge that is often very local, and that is the manner in which we make that data available to communities within cities. And so whether that's the digital divide on a more kind of broader level, or whether that's at a very, very smaller scale, the role and purpose of public libraries, we can think about data not just in an aggregate sense, but really, again, also in a user demand sense. The transition of infrastructure extends not just horizontally, but vertically as well, to the entire repositioning of the design of buildings, and how buildings relate to one another, how buildings relate to infrastructure. And as we all know, and I've already heard this morning, the issues and challenges of urban mobility are just being so radically transformed through data-enabled management. And we have just a couple more themes here. One is the need to really think about the nexus of housing and changing communities. We have had so much of our housing policy focus on certain demographics, but as we start thinking about truly sustainable cities, we need to think about truly sustainable housing policies that allow people to preserve their social networks and live in affordable housing. And there are kind of two last themes that I'd like to share. One is this need to overcome the important advances in an urban analysis to think about how to use this analytical frameworks that we're creating to actually invest and build and transform the city. So moving from knowledge and theory to practice and implementation is absolutely key, as we know from the modeling that has been done. There is only one way in which we will collectively be able to respond to the challenges of climate change, and that will be to make our cities more sustainable. And then finally, I'd like to just share a idea around the kinds of behavior change that are occurring in cities because of new data frameworks and information systems. It was very rare until about 15 years ago that we would, in a very premeditated way, learn about, arrange, and fully conceptualize the experiences that we would have in a city, and indeed that is what we all do on a regular basis now. So the amount of premeditation that goes into how we as individual consumers and residents of cities or organize our activities is dramatically different than what we've experienced in the past. We research what we were going to do, we learn more about it, and then we arrange for it to happen, and then we go and actually do it. And whether that's the transformation of retail through e-commerce, or an extension of those patterns into the realm of cultural interaction in cities, certainly going out to dinner. These are things that we prearrange. And so this concept of integrating the social life of cities with the digital frameworks of cities is something that is certainly happening, but I'm not sure if we have fully studied or understood this to a great degree. There is a large body of literature, of course, that was formulated, especially in the 1990s and early 2000s, about the anticipated dispersal of communities as a result of information technologies, but we have seen the opposite in recent years. And so our need as social beings to come together and to experience public spaces, experience and create culture within cities is something that has only been further enabled by information technologies. And we see very interesting and really exciting new ways of establishing value propositions within cities that dramatically break from the norms of how those economies have been organized in the past. So with that, I'd like to just close and say that, again, being a planner and being an optimist, that we need to envision the scenarios that we want to envision future cities. We have to envision multiple scenarios reflecting the complexity of our society, and as we do so, with these incredible new tools that we have, I do believe that we'll be able to shape that sustainable future that we not only want, but we actually need. Thank you very much.